Hi there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. I apologize for running a few minutes late.
No worries.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. So before we start this practice interview, I wanted to ask you a few questions just to make sure that I give you the right kind of interview preparation. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Is this the first time that you're using interviewing.io?
No, I've already had like three previous sessions. Yeah.
Cool. And what job position and experience level are you interviewing for?
So I recently graduated with a degree in computer science, and I'm looking for my first software engineering position. I
Cool.
currently have interviews lined up for startups and FAANG adjacent companies.
Cool. Oh, that answers my next question too. Do you you're interviewing for both startups and FAANG adjacent companies. Is there any preference to which one you'd rather work in?
Uh, Either. I'm really open to anything.
Okay, great. And have you had any interviews so far, or have you yet to have your first interview?
I've done online assessments and phone screenings, but I haven't had a real interview yet. Yeah,
Cool. And so, sorry, and you've passed some phone screens, so you do have some on-sites coming up.
yeah. I do have an on-site coming up.
Cool. Those are all my questions. Okay, so I can tell you a little bit about myself anonymously, and then let you know what I can offer you, and then we can take it from there.
Okay.
So I work for a large FAANG company in Seattle, and um, at least the company that I work for, actually, you're an interesting case because new graduates are hired in a special intake pipeline internally in my company. All that means is that interviews are very standard, especially at big companies, the way they run them. But for new graduates, you often the experience feels like being a very small cog. Like there's like a when it's new grad hiring season, it's just the volume of people that are interviewed means that sometimes the interviews might be really short at my company. Like it may even only be 2 rounds, something absurd like that. Usually for even entry level positions, there's like 4 or 5 rounds. But for new grads, because of the volume, sometimes it's very short. All that means is that usually with these interviews, there's a lot of leeway for not, you can do badly on a round or two, but with new grad interview, unfortunately, because of the time constraints, that's not true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely does make sense.
That's the downside of a FANG company's graduate hiring scheme. At least at my company, that's my experience of it. It's a bit unfortunate.
Yeah.
At my company, we place an even emphasis on behavioral and technical competencies, but in this preparation, we'll just only be focusing on the technical part,
Sure.
especially because some startups and FANG adjacent companies only do technical interviews. So it's the best kind of preparation to do, really. If you do care about FANG companies, you should just get preparation specific for that company.
Yeah. I currently don't have. I didn't feel I was prepared applying for fan companies. Like it is something I'm definitely interested in, but I would definitely like more preparation for that. Maybe like as my second job, not as my first job.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, at my
Yeah.
company, if you apply during this season, we call it April to November, then you're in this hyper accelerated pipeline. Kind of, and like, interviews are always hit or miss, but new graduate interviews especially. But if you apply as your second job, then it'll be a regular interview for maybe an entry level position or maybe an experienced position.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, especially since you're done with phone screens, but you're still interviewing for an entry level position, um, yeah, I think I know which question I'd like to give you. So at my company, these technical questions tend to run on the simpler side, and they tend to have lots of extensions. And so
Okay.
But for entry-level positions, I'll just tell you up front with these questions, I don't expect you to reach any of the extensions. So this question may strike you as simple, but um, I'll what we can do, depending on how well you do on it, is maybe we'll go through the extensions, but we'll stay within the time limit. So at my company, each round is 1 hour, and the behavioral questions are 20 minutes, and the technical question is 35. So we'll stick to 35. We'll even run over if you need more time, and we'll do all the extensions if you reach the extensions.
Perfect. That sounds great to me.
And also, I guess I should tell you this, especially for large companies, probably also FAANG adjacent, you'll have rounds of interviews, probably 4 or 5 or whatever, and each person is looking for something different in the question that you're answering. And you can try to guess, like you could, or you can just pick up on the cues of the interviewer, or even just ask them directly what they're interested in if you're concerned about it.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's been one of my. I think a thing I realized from my previous interviews is that sometimes I've been too afraid to ask what they're looking for.
Yeah, you can ask. They can always say no, but you can always ask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste the description into the code editor, and you can switch to a language and start using it. At my company, we don't let people run the code interactively, but I know especially startups will let you run the code interactively. The choice is yours if you want to run the code interactively or not. I would prefer if you didn't, but it's yours.
Yeah, sure. I'll probably I'll probably deal without. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I pasted the question into the editor.
Okay. An online retailer is releasing a new feature called "What Are My Friends Buying?" The feature lists products that you have not already purchased from the thing that your friends have bought, in order of most bought to the least bought. To help with this, we have the following two APIs. Complete the function that takes in a person and returns the item that the person's friends are buying. Okay, so first API returns a list of items purchased by a person. If purchased multiple items, an item will be in the list multiple times. Okay. And the second is returns a list of friends of a person. Okay. I just need a second to reread the question, just to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an interface for the person object?
That's a good question. You can think of the person object as an interface, and you don't have to use Java. This code happens to be written in Java, but if you want to use any other programming language, you can, and just assume it's an object.
Okay. It's an object. Purchased multiple times. The items will be. I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question correctly, but not only would I have to write these two methods, I would also have to. I'm just not quite sure I get the question.
Cool. So these two methods on lines 14 and 19 are given to you, so you can assume that they exist. And your goal is to create a third new method that can implement the ask in the first paragraph, implement that question.
Oh, I see. Oh, so we're given these two methods and we need to write a third method.
Exactly.
And that third method, Okay, so we get okay, that clarifies it quite a bit. So we're looking through all of our friends. So the method we have to write, we'll look at all the things our friends bought,
Mhm.
and we filter out the items that we have bought, and then we return the items that are left. But we only need to return one of those items. There might be duplicates.
Mhm.
Is that is my understanding valid?
Yeah, that sounds right. Maybe if you type it down quickly, just to confirm it, that'd be useful.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and switch to Java. I'm gonna copy and paste the question there.
Okay.
I also happen to code in Java.
Okay.
Okay. So these are given, and we're expected to write a method that returns a list of items.
Mhm.
There should be a get items, get new items from friends. Person. So what we're trying to do is we need to find the friends of this person. Create a list of all the items they bought,
Mhm.
the friends bought. Find the list of items this person has bought,
Mhm.
and then we need to filter out list of all friends. Filter out list of person's items from all friends' items.
Mhm.
Okay. So my first thought can I
But
assume that there will always be
the
oh,
final,
sorry.
just to be clear, you need to return the items in a particular order from most bought to least bought.
Okay. Yes, and sort sort results by popularity. Okay. So I think I just need one more second to clarify my ideas. Can I assume that there will always be friends? Can I ignore checking for nulls?
You you shouldn't assume there are always friends, but you can ignore null handling.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Okay. So I think if we create a hash map for all the items our friends bought, if that's the first thing we do, and then we update the frequency every time we encounter the same item again, we can then later use that to help us sort at the end.
And so you're using a hash map to kind of count how many items.
To keep track of the frequency.
And why are you using a hash map for that use case?
Because it has a search and insert time of 01, it has constant time. That way we don't need if we sort into an array, we don't have to look up where the index of the item we're trying to update is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I was also thinking we could use a hash set as a filter, even before we look for the items that our friends bought. And if we have an item in there, we just don't add it to the new hash map.
Mm-hmm. And why are you using a hash set for that?
Same thing. It has the benefit of O1 search and adding in so that way we don't. So once again, we don't need to look. We don't need to look for the index of the item we're trying to update.
Mm-hmm. What would an alternative be to using, just for that case, a hash set for figuring out if you've already bought it?
An alternative approach might be if the list of items were sorted alphabetically, you could use a two-pointer solution, one to keep track of your items and one to keep track of your friend's item, and then you can get rid of duplicates that way, incrementing both pointers up, and if they match, but that's I think much slower.
All right, cool. That's fine. So let's. I agree it would be slower, and let's keep on going with your proposal.
Okay. So I'm just gonna reorder it. So I'm gonna find a list of items that we bought first, just because we can filter it before populating the hash map. Okay, so we can go ahead and code out in this order. Hash set. I'm going to call it owned. I think that's appropriate. Owned filter. Set. Or item person dot get is filter dot add item. So next we're gonna create a hash map of items. First we're gonna store the list of friends. List person friends equals person dot get friends. And then for each friend, so for each friend, we're going to look at their items. And for these items, I realize now that we need our hash map a little bit earlier. I'm going to call these recommended purchases, or just recommended. actually, I just realized we can call. It might be worth renaming owned filter to like purchased. But I'll handle that later. Now, if actually, I'm just going to rename it to already purchased. I think that conveys I think that conveys a better message of what this is. If already purchased dot contains item, we ignore it. So if we negate that, if we haven't already purchased it, then we're gonna update our recommended output recommended get or def. And what this code means is if it is a new item that isn't in recommended, get or default would return 0, and we just add 1 to it. But if we already have 2 of those items in it, then it'll update it from 2 to 3. And we're returning the items as a list. So what we can do here is have a list item result equals new array list. I believe I might be mistaken here, but I do believe we can put recommended dot key set.
Sure, that looks reasonable. Let's just assume that you can do that.
Yeah. And now all we have to do is sort it. Is it okay if I use dot sort with my own custom lambda expression?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So if we sort results, A minus B. We want it in terms of most bought, right? So what we can do is recommended dot get E minus recommended dot get A. You just and I think that should work, and then we return results. Although, actually, to be safe, I don't think this will ever happen, but just to prevent overflow, we can use compare.
What does overflow mean in this context?
Just for okay, you'll never get it, but like let's say A was really big near the integer max range and B was really small. If you subtracted A from if you subtracted of the two, sorry, so if A was a really big positive number and B was a really large negative number, because you're subtracting it, that might as well turn into a positive, and you could create a value that's greater than the integer range.
Okay.
I think this is correct. I'm just not sure if I need I just can't quite count the parentheses in the last line on the line 68.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
Yeah, but I think that should work.
Cool. Can you go through an example quickly?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let me just create. Yeah, sure. So let's say we have let's say that we have two friends, friend A, and B, and we bought items 1, 2, 3, 4. And our friends bought items 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and they bought, and 10 is most popular, 9 is the second most popular, 8 is
Okay.
most popular, etc. Okay. So here, already purchased would contain 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and our friends also bought 4, 3, 2, and 1. Here we will get would be equal to A and B. Recommended is empty. Here for each friend, if we see 1, 2, 3, 4, ignore. We update the recommended. Recommended would then be equal to 10 with a frequency of 10, 9 with a frequency of 9, etc., all the way up until 5 with a frequency of 5. Results would just store the key set, which would just be 10, 9, 8, all the way up to 5, but not necessarily in that order.
Okay.
And the results should rearrange it to that order.
Cool.
Of this sort statement. Yeah.
So what's the time and space complexity of your answer?
Okay. I just need 1 second. Would you? So I'll define it in terms of total items, or I'm just thinking about how to define it, just because there isn't like an obvious n input. So there isn't like a singular input, because we do have items and the.
Yeah, you're right. You're correct. There isn't an obvious input, and so whatever you choose to define, just write it down somewhere, and we can discuss it. So you can just choose which terms you want to define, and then state your time and space complexity with respect to those terms.
Okay. I'll just call it. I'll define in terms of total items, or I'll have n equals number of items. And we'll assume that the items that we purchased is small, is insignificant relative to the items that our friends bought. That they're like thousands of products, while we've only bought like tens or maybe hundreds. So for this in terms of time complexity, this would be fairly insignificant, so we don't have to count this bit. Sorry, I just need 1 more second.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, sorry, instead of defining n as number of items, we can just have two variables, f, number of friends, and number of items that they have. And I'll just assume that on it, yeah, items would be, sorry, I think the space-time complexity of this would be, so this would be, f times items.
Okay.
While sorting this, assuming we use something like merge sort or quick sort, that would then become OF and log f times n. Oh wait, no, sorry. This would just be our friends won't matter at this point. It would just be O n log n, where n is the number. I log I, where I is the number of items.
Okay.
And I log I is smaller than I, so this can be reduced and ignored in our big O analysis. So I think the time complexity ultimately would be f times I, the number of friends times the number of items.
And so is I the number of items that you're returning? Is that what that is?
Oh no, I'm not. I'm returning the actual list of items. Oh, do you mean for my time complexity analysis or my results analysis or my actual results?
Oh, not that. Just from the time and space complexity. On line 55, we have n is number of items, but I think you mean now it's I is number of items?
Yes. I equals number of items. Yeah.
That's fine. And the f is
number
of friends. Okay.
Yeah.
And so is I the number of items per friend, or is it because
I guess technically this would be like small I items per friend, and I is just the total number of, and the big I could be the total number of the items.
okay.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just below line 55, type in what the time and space complexity is.
It would be time would be OF I plus I. Space complexity, what we're really storing is the max. We're only ever storing I plus our yeah. Our recommended will only ever be as big as I, big I, the total number of items.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming friends is significantly, it could also be F if we could have an arbitrarily large number of friends.
Cool. Okay. And can you think of any edge cases, ignoring null checks, but any edge cases that you think you need to consider?
Sure. Let me just take a second to think about it. Any special cases? Sorry, I just need one more. I just need a little bit more time.
Okay.
My intuition is telling me that there might be. Well, I guess if you have 0 friends, then you will get recommended 0 products.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one such problem. If I guess if you like recommended the service to a friend and you referred them and recommended them to buy products, then if you bought more items than your friends have, then there's a possibility that nothing will be recommended because what they bought you've already bought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are the 2 special cases I can think of.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
That might occur in real life.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is give you an extension to the problem.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'm going to place this description on line 34.
Sure. Instead of your friends, what about your social circle? Social circle is defined as the person's friends and their families. Oh, I see. Okay. So my first thought is it's pretty easy to add another loop to get the friends of friends. But what we have to ensure is we need to keep track of which people we've already iterated over. Because if we expand it to social circles, 2 of my friends are probably friends with each other, and we don't need to add, and we don't want to be redundant and go through their list twice, or like increase the count of an item. We don't want to multi-count. So I think adding a hash set for to keep track of like in a similar vein to like breadth first search or depth first search, we just keep track of which people we visited.
Okay.
If we think of this as a connected graph, we just want to make sure that we don't go over the same people again.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to implement that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So hash set person reviewed. I think that's an appropriate name for this variable. These are people we have or like already reviewed. Hash set person. And clearly after we go over ourselves, we should add ourselves to review because friends of our friends or the social circle of our friends will include us, but by definition. So review Adam. So here we need another for loop person. We can call it friend2. From friend dot get. From get friend. Technically, I'm being inconsistent. I'll just keep that there. We can just do it after list person friends 2 equals friend dot get friends. And here, because we've already gone through our friends already reviewed, we're gonna add our friend to it. Actually, we should do a check for. I just realized that we probably do actually do a check for them.
Yeah, and that makes sense that you add a check there.
Yeah.
So this would be the end of 35 minutes. So what I'd like to do is give you feedback now, and then we can keep going with this question.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
So this isn't a particularly difficult question, but the main focus of the question was evaluating your data structures and algorithms knowledge, which is also not to great depth, but still evaluating that. But at the same time, I was impressed with how you made your high-level proposal using comments. I'm just going to get lines 51 to 56. That's a really great way of clarifying what your high-level proposal is. The fact that I told you to write it down wasn't a big deal, but you'll see once you write it down, it's very easy to refer to it, and also what the interviewer is going to be doing at the end of the interview is just copy paste this into some internal tool as part of the interview debrief, and it's helpful that you can write down your thought process. That's particularly useful. And then the reason I asked you the very simple questions about, hey, why are you using a hash map? Hey, why are you using a hash set, is to make sure you're able to make trade-offs between different data structures. So your proposal to sort the items alphabetically and use 2 pointers was very novel, but actually the purpose of my question was very simple. It's just like, hey, you're using a hash set to do, and you answered it correctly, to do an efficient lookup. What else could you look up in? That's literally all I'm asking. It's not. So when you get a question like that, often people are just trying to check a box and make sure you can make trade-offs between data structures.
Right.
And what else? I think one thing. I think I like how you did code it correctly, and you explained everything well. I've never had someone had to explain integer overflow before. That was a nice touch, and I think your code was correct when you wrote it, and that's fine. So, and when I asked you to walk through it with an example, you walked through it correctly. When I asked for the time and space complexity, it's a little bit confusing the way you expressed it, but actually, I think it's correct enough, and so I liked it. So overall, I would say you did very well for this question for an entry-level SDE.
Thank you.
So the feedback I have is it's not strong. So like one thing is, I don't know, it's just like how to use Java, but like there's just a lot of small mistakes you made, and they're not important. So like an interviewer could care less about syntax. I don't really care about syntax, but like there's just very small things. I don't know if it's important for you to prepare for this as well, but I'll give you the feedback anyway. So like line 63, it's like you need to new everything. So you need to put new like this.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot the new. Yeah.
Not important. I don't really care about that. And also I noticed, line 65, 68, you make it, then you put stuff in, like it's kind of cool. It's not that important, but you can make collections from other collections. So you can do a new hash set, and you can shove in person.get purchases. It's not important, but it's just something that Java offers you. I guess something else to me it's super minor is the person object is not the one that has the method get purchases. Instead, what you're given is a method called get purchases. I'm pointing at line 28. It's a method called get purchases that you call to get the purchases. But honestly, it's not the point of the question, but I noticed it, so I made a note of it.
I see.
And also, stuff like line 102, I don't think arrays.sort works on a list. I think you want to use collections.sort, but it's not that important. But it's just small things like that I noticed. In an interview, they don't really care about it, so I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I noticed in your method signature on line 50, you use a list of items instead of a list of item. Also, I didn't really care about that too much.
Yeah.
So all these. Yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna say I guess I guess like in interview settings, I'm a bit like more nervous, and then my brain just gets a little bit.
Yeah, I noticed that you do sound nervous, and I also noticed that you apologize a lot. I'm not going to tell you to stop apologizing. That's a very condescending thing to say. Being in an interview is very nerve-wracking, and so all I would say is, it's great, you're doing fine, and don't worry about the syntax errors, and it's not a big deal.
Okay.
For the time and space complexities, my advice is, I don't know, it's like try to define it in terms of stuff that's coming in. So like it's just this use of capital I was a bit confusing for me, but you're right, because the problem is kind of like, how do I define it? It's like, you have to come up with a term which is unique items that I did not purchase that my friends purchased. I need something, but all you need to do is, if you're going to use something, then just define it. I think just like with the high-level proposal, simply typing it out would just saves a lot of time. You can just, on line 107, I think we both understood what F is.
Yeah.
That's fine. But this, what the heck? But capital I was kind of confusing, but you can just say, it's a difficult term to define. It's just like number of items friends bought that you did not. It's a tricky term.
Yeah.
The point of defining time and space complexity is you discover kind of like the directions in which the elastic bands of the problem stretch. So you can say things like, what happens as the number of friends increases to the time and space complexity? Or what happens to as the number of items increase or decrease? And so I noticed you made an assumption. You said like, I can assume that the number of items my friends bought dominates my own items. And that you could assume that, or you could just throw it in as a term. You could just say, hey, define M as the number of items I've bought. And that way you can have a fuller expression. And then that's like the elastic band. You can say, oh, but M is dominated. Or you can say, but I could counter and say, what if M is not dominated?
I see.
For such a simple problem, like whatever. But, like my advice is, you don't need to make assumptions. You can just assign a term to it, and be sure to write it down so it's clear to everybody what the term means.
I see. Yeah. I guess my biggest worry was up until very recently, I always thought you had to reduce it to like one variable ideally, and like at most maybe two.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I'm understanding, it's okay if the inputs are a bit ambiguous. It's okay to have more.
Yep, if the inputs are more ambiguous, it's okay to have more. And also, it's a conversation that you can have with the interviewer. If you're worried that they want some reduced form or something simpler, you can ask them. I'm concerned that this. You told me actually you were concerned about how ambiguous the inputs were, and I told you that's great. Let's just write down the terms of what the inputs are. Whereas another interviewer may say, oh yeah, just try to write it into a smaller form.
I see.
So yeah, that's my feedback and my advice. Oh, do you have any questions right now?
I don't have any more questions right now.
So that's the entry level SDE part. And then, the extension question is, hey, let's start doing friends of friends. And I think this is where it went. I mean, the coding is fine. It's just, so what's the extension? The extension is, hey, instead of just your friends, what about friends and the friends of friends, right? And so you're doing all the right things, and also it's really impressive that you spotted that you have to. I'm pointing at line 63 that you're doing the visited set, but really this whole extension only boils down to one line. It's only line 75. So you have all this machinery that does the right things once it knows what friends to process. But the question is, oh, we're changing what the definition of friends is. So something to consider is when you get an extension to a question, trying to see what is changing about the problem, and maybe you can minimize the amount of code you need to touch. Because that way, like when you walk through it with a test, like example later on, you touched so little of it, you can just say, oh, all this is the same. All I've done is change line 75.
I see. I see.
And it's not even that, it's not complicated. It's more like, hey, instead of person.get, whatever get friends person
Friends,
should be.
friends person, yeah.
It doesn't matter. So instead of this, it could be get social circle person.
I see. And then I could define that method instead
Yep.
of modifying my code.
Yep. And this might come up for you in the future if you get extension questions. Just consider what part of the question is changing and how much can I reuse and how much do I need to write from scratch.
I see. Yeah. I guess a difficult thing for me to realize is when to. I guess the answer is always, but I've always struggled to figure out when is the right time to modularize and create a sub function for something. Yeah.
That's tough. I mean, it depends on your coding style. Like if sometimes it's easier for some people to work bottom up, and so they write a bunch of helper methods and they kind of glue it all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, so maybe for the last few minutes that we have left, what we can do is, so there's this notion of get social circle. And I know like your code will probably work fine. Let's just assume you only change this line. Let's implement get social circle for the current definition of the problem, which is, hey, you want to return, your definition is great. You are included in your social circle. That's great. You want to return your friends. And then you want to return for those friends each of their friends.
Yes.
And in fact, why not? I'll give you the second extension, but like usually I just I wait, but you can just do this. I'm typing on line 40. So we're going to do a social circle of an arbitrary depth.
Oh. Okay, I see. Yeah. So with the first extension, my method was passable. With the second extension, it definitely isn't passable once I broke it down into sub functions. Okay. So I'll go ahead and do you want me to explain it, or should I try and see if I can code it? Because I'm being conscious of the time that we have left.
I think it's a good habit to the triple that I would do is write a method signature, be extremely crisp about what the input is, what the output is, and exactly like you did on lines 54 to 58, write some high-level steps, as many as you want, maybe one line, maybe a few lines. Then then you can write the code.
Okay. This person gets social circle. Person.
And some interviewers freak out if you start writing code. They may accuse you of jumping into coding. So just always clarify, I'm just writing the function signature. I just want to clarify I understand the inputs and the outputs.
Okay, yeah. So my input will be the person you're trying to get the social circle of.
Mm-hmm.
And the output will be a list. The output will be a list of people.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to, and I guess the second input would be depth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think we're going to use a BFS search. We'll have a visited hash set just to make sure we're not double counting people. And we're going to need a queue. And the only other special consideration for this BFS search is we do need to keep track of the levels. There are multiple ways of doing this. One method is to, at every depth, you can add like a null person and use that to keep track of what level you're on. The other way is embedding another while loop inside, but I'm not too familiar with that method.
Okay.
So I'll just write special consideration, keep track of depth with null person object.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we need to make sure that we add ourselves to visited and the queue before we start the loop. While queue. Add person. Add person. Could I go ahead and start coding it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good high level description. We don't have that much time left, and this is especially your use. I think the fancy term is sentinel, but the use of nulls is great. This definitely will work. I'm curious, why did you choose BFS instead of some other graph search method?
With BFS, it's really easy to keep track of the depth, just because, like if you have a, yeah, because this will be the first on the queue, this would be the second thing added to the queue, and these would be on third level. And if you separate by nulls, it's just really easy to keep track of. I think there might be a way of doing it with DFS and one of the traversal methods. I'm just not too familiar with which traversal method would yield that.
Cool. I mean,
yeah.
For graphs, let's just say there's only two, depth first search and breadth first search. Let's just assume there's only two. And so something this BFS, this iterative BFS is my favorite technique for traversing graphs in interviews. But something to consider is you can practice this yourself. I'm sure you can implement it correctly. But can you keep track of depth in BFS? What does that look like? And does it work? Can you enforce depth using a BFS search? And what does that look like?
Could you repeat that question once more, please?
Sure. So your method for using BFS with sentinels works. That's a little interviewing technique I'm aware of. Maybe we could use BFS with a stack and enforce a maximum stack size. Does that work, or does that not work? It's something for you to consider and play with.
So you're asking if there's a way of adding a stack to our BFS search to keep track of,
No, doing a DFS search with a stack of which you enforce a maximum size.
is there a way of doing that? Yes, I, I think you can.
Hmm.
Um, uh, in my mind, I can only really explain it if you use recursion and the implicit call stack. Instead of iteratively, it's a bit more ambiguous to me as to how you would do that, but I imagine it is definitely possible.
Cool.
If
And you know
you're,
what?
if you're, oh, sorry.
In an interview, what it always comes down to is it's fun to talk about it, but ultimately, my next question would be what would be the time and space complexity trade-offs between the two, and then yeah, that's where the discussion would go.
Right.
I think in this case, I don't think there's going to be a trade-off.
Yeah, I think it should be about the same. It's just with the DFS search, the largest size the key will ever be would be at the bottom depth. Whereas using DFS, the largest size the stack will ever be is it would be log n the total number of well, the maximum size it will ever be is just whatever our depth limit is.
Yeah, I understand. That's a good argument. I understand that. And then you could easily say that the nulls are just a constant addition of space.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. I buy that. I understand that argument. So thanks a lot for your time. So that is the interview. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah. I pick you up one. Do you have any with the places you, sorry, you were completely right when you said that with like FAANG adjacent companies they have skipped, or some of them do skip the behavioral interview, and that is the case with one of the companies I'm applying for.
Yeah.
I guess my main question is if I ever do apply to a FAANG company and I do have a behavioral interview right after the technical portion, after the 30 minutes, what advice would you give on how to prepare or like what I should expect?
Yeah. Just very briefly, there are books about it, and the most popular book is Cracking the Coding Interview, which frankly has pretty shockingly poor technical questions, but it has a very good description of behavioral interviewing. Cracking the Coding Interview, bad technical questions, but good good explanation of behavioral interviewing. And if you want more details on that, then interviewing.io offers specialized preparation for behavioral interviewing, including me. Cool. I can see that your mic is disconnected. I'm going to leave you with some written feedback, but thanks a lot for your time and good luck with your interviews. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.